Hi there! So The Book That Broke the World by Mark Lawrence is still a mouthful of a name, just like the last one, but this one is definitely more of that intriguing exploration that was set up in the first one of the idea of choice and knowledge itself, which sounds so pretentious, but hear me out. By the way, we're also going like full spoilers for this book just because it's going to be easier to talk about some ideas and themes. Also, context spoilers for like the first book. It's the second in a series, so we're basically talking about book 1 and book 2, but this is like a review thought. Honestly, just like a thought splurge. I don't even know if it's like a proper like review. I'm just talking about a book I like. But yes, full spoilers for this one and full context spoilers for books 1 and 2. But this one, the second one, definitely clarifies and sticks to that theme of like this massive library setting, hundreds of thousands of rooms that are each like 2 mile boxes, 4 square mile boxes, just full of all of this knowledge, all of this information from multiple races and like alien races. Whether or not having all of that information all at once is a good idea, and it doesn't seem to be. Because with this insane amount of knowledge that could theoretically help with any kind of situation, they're still just fighting over it all the time. And there were hints of this before, this theme that just like struck me for this second one, but I'm realizing there were hints of it before, of this like slightly obvious allegory that like this library setting is like our internet. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio, and that is a much bigger, more complicated conversation that honestly I don't think I'm intelligent enough to articulate. But the short form of that idea that kind of like clicked for me, with this whole like plethora of knowledge of this library and like our internet, we're always still kind of like fighting over things. But I also know objectively the internet can't like literally start or stop wars like this fictional place can. And I do believe that our world is better overall because we have the internet. There's a whole conversation there, even of just the internet's impact on our world in general. But I'm just here to talk about a cool narration. But focusing back on the book then, that theme of too much information is represented more clearly, set up in book 1, but represented more clearly here in the library's founder and his brother, in Arad and Jaspeth. I hope I'm pronouncing those right. And those two either want to like save the library that he helped create for the betterment of humanity, but the other one, the brother, wants to destroy it because it's doing more harm than good. It's overwhelming, there's too much going on all at once. And all of that overwhelming knowledge is like negating the good things that the founder was kind of hoping for. And instead of just sticking to like a regular black and white like argument, right? There's also the character Ute, who represents the gray area of compromise. But at the moment it's also discussed that's like too much of a gray area. There's too many questions there still. And our main character, Levira, she wants to save the library. She's on the founder side. She wants to save the library. She sees it as her home. But she ironically accidentally wrote the book that could literally break it because of time travel shenanigans. I love that theme. I love those discussions. Ute deserves a break. And I love the ambiguity around all of those questions and themes because none of these questions are easy to answer. I love all of that. But that's not all the story is, right? There's more chapters than that. And some of the other chapters that are not Levira's chapters, loved all of hers. But some of the other chapters I enjoyed, they were interesting. They set up a lot of stuff. But every now and then it felt a little bit like the narration overall was a little kind of spinning its wheels a little bit. This book had the feeling of like that second book in a series where you're just kind of like setting up and itching for the third one. And that's not to say that those chapters were like boring or anything, because there's like Avar's chapters and there's Arpix's chapters, and they got their own like storylines going on, their own like thought process, but like their main overall combined goal is just survive. There's a lot of bad things happening. There's a lot of bad things chasing Avar. There's a lot of danger, and they just want to survive. They just want to live, which is fair. So once Avar's group and Arpix's group, I'll admit, I keep stumbling over Arpix's name. I think my tongue just doesn't like it. But they finally meet, and they realize that like, no, things are still kind of like bad here. We should probably go back to the library. They left initially. We need to go back. I immediately thought of the Lost meme. If you know Lost, you know. But they need to go back, and they need to find Ute to then find Levira again. And like, we want Avar and Levira to reunite after this setup and everything and their little romance in the first book. Yes, please reunite. Also, things are very threatening. There's tension. There's big bug aliens coming to get them. It's fun action moments. That's awesome. And we also get set up and clues, I think, for book 3. There's loads of questions set up about this like statue of their friend that they see, a friend that they know, but the statue is like hundreds of years old. How is that there? And none of that is answered yet, but there's still plenty of like action and tension. Those scenes are fun. And then there's Selcha's chapters, I will admit. I'll actually even like put it up on the screen somewhere. I don't know how to pronounce her name. I don't know if it's a hard C or a soft C. I'm sorry if I'm just pronouncing it wrong the whole time, but my brain kind of settled on Selcha. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, I might be. But the most intriguing part about her chapters are actually what's happening to her brother and this grand apocalyptic plot that she helps out with. And it gets a little out of hand because story. And like I said about context spoilers of like book 1 as well, at one point within book 1, Levira and Navarre, when they're like exploring the whole library and its little intricacies and the time travel shenanigans, they discover a version of their city, their home, in like the past where everyone is just gone. It's just empty. Everyone is gone. There's no one around. There's no one around. They see a couple of like assistants running away, but that's it. They don't know what happened. And now in book 2, we're realizing, we come back to that moment with Selcha, and after what she did, and realize that the entire city, it wasn't just quiet, people weren't just gone. No, everyone was dead. Everyone was just dead, asleep in their beds because of this poison gas that Selcha helped set up with her brother. Like, okay, she's got some guilt. Fair. And that was a good moment of just being the reader, seeing these pieces being set up for Selcha, and then realize what it's leading up to before she does. That's a good moment. That was a good moment. Now what I mean though about Selcha's chapters though, as I keep talking at the moment, it might seem too vague, but trust me, if you've read them, they will make sense. But I also want to stay vague in regards to like not spoil like everything, right? Because also, time travel shenanigans, things get weird in general. But at one point, after the apocalyptic moment has happened and everyone in the city is dead, but there's just Selcha left alive, she sees these weird ghostly outlines of 2 figures flying around the city, having a good time. And she associates those 2 ghosts with the 2 ghosts that her brother was talking to, who she blames for this whole dead city thing. That these 2 ghosts manipulated her and her brother to do this. She feels bad, she feels guilty, and she's blaming these 2 ghosts that she sees. Well, these ghosts are Avar and Levira, who we saw in book 1 dancing around, and us as the reader, we know all the context that Selcha doesn't. But fast forwarding to like the end of this book too, there is eventually a resolution because Selcha like vows revenge on Avar and Levira, thinking that they manipulated and caused all this. When we know that they didn't, that is eventually resolved by the end. And overall, fun action set piece at the end, but that element didn't quite land for me. I think mainly just because there's like a pseudo conversation between Levira and Selcha's brother, who's in the body of an assistant, and Selcha is there, but in a time travel-y way where they can't see her. There's a lot of stuff going on. Because it's eventually like resolved for the characters individually, but Levira and Shelta don't even talk. They don't get to talk to each other. Levira and Navarre didn't even know that was happening. So by the end, most of that with all of Selcha's chapters felt like set up to an interesting, a decent apocalyptic moment, a good realization moment for the reader, but then another setup and conclusion that didn't land, I'll admit, because it didn't feel hugely plot relevant and it didn't really affect our characters that we knew from book 1, Levira and Navarre. There is, through the time travel shenanigans, there are like giant robots coming after Avar at some points, and like we know why, he doesn't know why. Like the pieces are put together, but at the very end, I think those robots were just there to make a fun action set piece, and he just needed an explanation for why it was there, and he fleshed it out a little more. I don't know, it didn't land for me. I don't know why, I'll admit. Now it did flesh out some like world building moments. That was great. And it like filled in some pieces that we might have been like curious about. And maybe Selcha will be more relevant within book 3 as well. Maybe this is just more setup for book 3. Totally fair. Now I will admit there are 2 nitpicky things I'll admit I just kind of wasn't a fan of. It didn't ruin, neither of them like ruin the story by any means, but they just felt a little off. At one point, while Lavera is going through her main plot of trying to like get her book back in her possession to like try to stop it from breaking the library, she meets, while she's on that kind of a journey, she meets this mysterious little white child and doesn't immediately know who it is. I feel like Avera would know who this is. She knows that Ute was an assistant who turned human with a wife. He had a wife too, and he had a daughter who went missing in the library 10-ish years ago. And while Lavera is like within the library and using its like magics, she comes across this young albino child who's human but also strangely assistant-like, and she doesn't clue in that it's his daughter. She does eventually figure out that it's Ute's daughter, right? And granted, she appears as a child. She's been missing for like 10 years, but it looks like she hasn't aged or anything. But Lavera also knows about the library's time travel shenanigans. So I feel like the moment Lavera saw this little girl who's like 10-ish, 10, 12-ish, who's like weirdly assistant-like, but also weirdly human-like, she would have known. I feel like she knew about Ute's daughter. I feel like she would have known. And the other thing I wasn't a fan of, and this is just because I love a good villain, and I know Mark Lawrence can write good villains and anti-heroes and anti-villains and whatever the hell Jorgan Krath is, but the king in this book, he's in the first book, but then he shows up at the end of this one. He's a little cartoonishly villainous because he's not a good king. We kind of know this. He's not a good guy. But when he's in the library with like a group of refugees and everything, a bunch of his citizens, he's told by an assistant by the library that like these center patches, these center circles within each room of the library, it'll sustain you. It'll keep you healthy. It'll keep you safe. You don't even need to worry about like eating for a long while. You'll be safe here. It'll sustain you. You'll be fine. He chooses no, I'm not gonna believe that, and we choose cannibalism. What? Like, we know he's not really like a trustworthy guy, but you're immediately gonna jump to cannibalism? It almost feels like Lavera didn't have like a direct threat. She didn't have a direct villain. She had threats to like the library and her main goal. She had goals and passions and all of that, totally fine. But she didn't have like a person going after her. But I will swing back to that idea in a second. But it feels like at the end of this, she might not have had this like grand villain for like this one. And then the king is kind of just like thrown at her at the end. Granted, she's kind of thrown at him. But it just felt like this evil king was just thrown into the mix at the end for a dramatic climax. Now, granted, there is an element of him that I do like. And this is kind of swinging back to what I glossed over a second ago. He hates Lavera for some reason. And it feels personal, and we don't know why yet. Initially in book 1, she's like a kid when she meets him, like on his grand throne, being presented as like a new librarian and everything. And she's just a kid, and he just automatically doesn't like her. And it's presented as like prejudice because she was born outside of the city in like the desert in the dust. And he just doesn't like her for that reason. But this feels personal, and maybe there's some time travel shenanigans that are yet to be revealed. I don't know yet. I hope that's leading to something because it feels personal. So yeah, I'm just suspecting time travel shenanigans that we don't know yet. And I'm here for that. I am here for those questions. Cannibalism? Sure. But I'm more here for like the, why does he hate her? So overall, now that I'm kind of like talking through it and thinking through it, the book that broke the world, it's good, but it does feel like a trust the process setup kind of book. We got some puzzle pieces, not all of them, and that feels purposeful. And as I was reading it, in regards to like the time travel shenanigans that I keep mentioning, there's only one other series story that kind of gave me this specific feeling that all time is happening all at once, but it's also linear at the same time. Like both things are true. And that was the TV show Lost, mainly around the final seasons. And I do kind of wonder if Mark Lawrence is like a fan of Lost. I can't say anything towards the man's like character, but like I feel like he enjoys Lost. So anyway, those are my thoughts, but I'm gonna sign off. And I am intently waiting for book 3. I am so excited for the conclusion to all of this. And also feel free to like and subscribe, and I hope you guys have a nice day, whether it's productive or restful, whatever you need.